little bit of a switch. We actually scheduled it this way, but we are going to start with our work session instead of the regular meeting at 10 o'clock. And I apologize for the delay. We had one, no, it's not anyone's fault. It's the weather, and I'm thankful you're here safely. We had two board members actually slowed down by traffic and
rain and a wreck.
And that's the same thing that has happened to Dr. Richardson. There is a wreck, a horrible one, where apparently the car turned several times along the interstate. And so thankfully she is safe, but we'll be here shortly. And she is a part of the presentation for the policies regarding the use of outside legal counsel. So we will proceed with Mr. Sentence's estate plan presented for discussion, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Sentence and anyone else who will be making that presentation. The reason why we are holding both the work session and the regular meeting in this particular room is because it's taken, and it also allows for a larger crowd, and I'm thankful that we have this room available. So thank you, Ann, for making those arrangements. Mr. Sentence.
We're not doing the pledge, or?
No, this is actually an agenda for the work session, and we don't normally do a pledge, but it's on the agenda, but we're just going to move right into to the work session. And this is, again, not a voting meeting. This is just our informal work session that we have switched around, but we will hold the meeting at 11:30. Which has already been scheduled for that time.
So, good morning. This is doing a bit of an overview of the draft plan that you received the other day. This plan has been in development for more than a year. And so, you know, we'll go through what I've tried to do is to highlight some aspects of this, and you know, obviously we have staff here who can help answer questions about aspects of the plan. For those who don't know, the plan follows a template that is set out by the U.S. Department of Education. They provide a document which all states will be using to submit their plans, and it allows the states to fully answer whatever questions that the federal government might require under the Every Student Succeeds Act. But it's also for, I think, most people, a bit of a difficult read because it's written for education staff people in the U.S. Department of Education and for the peer reviewers that the U.S. Department of Education sends out to the states to analyze the documents. The draft of the plan, I think, is available on our website. If don't see Michael at the moment, but I think
this one is thick.
Yeah, I think it's available on the website. It's supposed to be. So as I said, this began over a year ago. There was an executive order that was issued that established a implementation committee. The executive order is attached to the plan as an exhibit, and it's discussed in there about how many, the selection process, who selected them, and so forth. I think the principal chairs of that committee were Secretary Ross, Shanthia Washington from our office, and Superintendent Matt Aiken, and I think they all did a commendable job. That document was presented to, their work was presented to the state board in, if I recall correctly, November. And then, we've been using that document as the foundation for a lot of our work because that group did, I think, exemplary work in pulling together information and resources and consulting with the field about aspects of the plan. In the fall, we set up 3 advisory committees to help develop strategic plans for math, reading, and science. And the convergence of all of this work is what developed the ESSA plan that you have before you. It borrows heavily from the strategic planning committees, but also relies heavily on the work that the ESSA committee did originally. As you know, we are doing this within the context of state education accountability law, and those plans are incorporated into the Act. One of the critical questions that is always in these plans and has been in terms of accountability since NCLB is what is the end size? What is the size of a group of students that's going to be used for any accountability purposes? The ESSA committee recommended 20. Other voices have suggested that perhaps a lower number is more appropriate, but after reviewing both research and what appears to be sort of a common baseline in other states, we held to the size of 20. The ESSA accountability goals were, again, tracked some of the other work that the state has done in past years. And so if you're wondering why, the reductions of 50%, were included, it matches previous statements that the State Department has made to the U.S. Department of Education. In terms of the other indicator for performance, the accountability work group suggested an attendance metric, and I think that if you look at the research, I think that the issue of chronic absenteeism has been one that is a critical issue. Obviously, the higher rate of chronic absenteeism, the more likelihood of a lack of academic success in school, and frankly, a lack of progress within the school community. So by focusing more specifically on that particular metric, I think that it will help to drive success in the future. And we have all of the other, aspects of the state law incorporated into this plan for accountability purposes in terms of differentiation and reporting requirements and so forth. More specifically, in terms of our goals, we borrow from our strategic planning conversations where we talk about raising the cohort graduation rate to 94% by 2030. We talk about focusing, again, on chronic absenteeism and reducing that to 5% by 2030. We want to increase the college and career-ready rate of graduates to 100% by 2021. And that's a fairly ambitious goal because right now that's about 72, 74%. So we've got a lot of work there to do to raise that academic credential for all graduates by that time. I think that also resolves a number of other issues that we may want to be thinking about, and that in particular making sure that a graduate in fact has attained an academic credential in this process, making sure that when we say to the public that someone is an Alabama graduate, that means that they have in fact attained something of value using the various indicators that we have for CCR. This one is novel. We're planning on developing a weighted student allocation to schools in Montgomery County. By doing that, we will be we will also be providing a choice mechanism for parents in the county. And there are several reasons for that. Some are strategic in terms of the U.S. Department of Education. Some of them are strategic in terms of the reform of schools. The fact of the matter is that if you're able to articulate a particular theme or focus for school, whether it's pedagogy, whether it's curriculum, that allows everybody in that school to use that as a means for improvement and for greater student achievement. Further, a system of choice will, we think, enhance parental involvement with schools. That there is research that shows that parents are more satisfied in a system of choice because they've selected the schools that they want for their students. By providing a weighted student allocation to the schools, we ensure that equity is attained in that school district, that it's a frequent conversation among some that some schools are benefited by a greater allocation of resources to those schools, and we think that over time, as this is implemented, that will answer those kinds of questions and challenges about equity within a school district. And from a strategic standpoint, it also, I think, helps us with the U.S. Department of Education. As we know, Secretary DeVos is a proponent of school choice, and as you may recall, the U.S. Department of Education proposed to the Congress a budgetary allocation of $1 billion carved out of the Title I allocation for something called FOCUS, and I can't remember the acronym for that, but the FOCUS allocation was to support school districts that had a weighted student allocation for choice within a state. As we didn't really have that, it seemed to me that the only way that we were going to be able to be competitive for those kinds of, for that kind of money was to develop a system that supported that so that we could at least be in the game. At least we could try to compete for that $1 billion pool of funds. As you also may know, the House did not support, the U.S. Department of Education's budget submission on choice, but and I'm more than willing to be guided by others. But I understand that there may be more interest in the proposal in the Senate, and in any event, it's going to be something that is going to continue to evolve over time. And the final issue is that there's been a student advisory program called REACH. It's been part of the department for well over a year, and that is part of our plan going forward. The other parts of this, of course, relate to specific programs that the U.S. Department of Education has allocated under ESEA, and they specifically relate to subgroups or particular programs that the department is responsible for. Part C is migratory children, and our program is frankly a continuation of programs and plans that we've had in place here in the State Department of Education for some time. Prevention and intervention, again, we have a series of issues that are going to be both monitored, reported, and acted upon based on reading and math, graduation rate, career and technical skills, among others, to make sure that we're having the kind of success with our schools that we all expect. Title II, which is part of the submission, but as you may know, is currently not funded in either the U.S. Department of Education's budget submission or the first iteration of the House budget. It does, however, the plan does call for us to have a plan to support effective instruction and improve our teaching corps. And we're borrowing heavily from the Strategic Planning Committee recommendations about more rigorous professional development and setting that up in a process by which we can both accredit individuals and schools for the kind of work that they do that's focused on the particular core subjects that we identify through the process. And we would be using, assuming that there is Title II funds going forward, we would be using Title II funds to establish an Office of Professional Learning that vets the professional development programs and accredits them in a far more robust way than they're currently done now. And then we will be producing a comprehensive educator preparation report card that will publicly provide everyone, policymakers and the institutions, with an understanding of how they're doing in terms of preparing teachers for our schools, because we have some issues and some gaps there. English language acquisition, we have much of this work is continuing from past practice and past programs, as recommended by the ESSA Planning Committee, and we will be continuing our participation in the WIDA consortia. This is obviously a source of growing interest and concern for local and state policymakers because of rising numbers in those programs.
What does WIDA stand for?
WIDA is, Barbara, Chantier? WIDA?
WIDA is not an acronym, that's the name of the consortium. It used to be an acronym of the first 4 states that started it, but it no longer is. It's not an acronym.
So it's just called WIDA now? Okay.
Thank you. She said she just had to run across. That was all.
No. Yeah. The grant programs are obviously segregated and defined programs within the ESEA. They're not expanded. In fact, some of them are cut back considerably from past years, but it's part of the submission that we have to make, and we will be continuing to support those as we go forward, as is the McKinney-Vento Act, also part of this proposal, and we will be proposing revisions to this as we have not had an update for a number of years. And that's about it for that.
Thank you, Mr. Sentance, and thank you. I had requested that we have the board members have a document with the plan, actually the ESSA plan, and I appreciate that by 5 o'clock on Friday, and we provided that. It was very helpful to have it with enough time to go through it, because obviously it has certainly a lot of pages, and it was good reading. 71 pages, so all of this is actually consolidated in this particular presentation. And at this point, certainly it is appropriate for board members to ask questions, and I'm sure that Mr. Sentence and others will be able to provide those answers. Do I have any questions from board members?
I do, but mine are inside my packet, so it's going to take me a minute. So
That's okay. This is a work session, and this is, although it looks more formal, it's supposed to be informal.
May I ask one question? Does this even to the the point of where I might have found a grammatical error or spelling, is that included? May I discuss that too?
You can certainly send that along. We've tried to have many eyes go over this, but, you know, we're all human here, so the failure is part of our makeup.
Well, and it would be helpful too, and I know you have provided the timeline at one of our meetings a month or two ago, and that's what I used in trying to set up this meeting. Just to give a little history for those who may not know, at the end of our last work session, I asked board members to share the best dates for them. Originally, the date provided by Mr. Sentance was on Thursday of this week. However, we may have had perhaps 3 people attend on Thursday because the best dates that were submitted to me lined up to be this date that obviously it is the best date because everyone is here. So with that, do you want to share at this point the timeline that you shared earlier with us?
Well, we have to file this with the U.S. Department of Education in mid-September. We'll be having a board meeting on that day. I think it's the 14th.
The day before, yeah, that week.
So we'll be filing once we have finished reviewing the draft and finalizing it. We'll be submitting that electronically that day. We'll also be, but under the executive order from the governor, we have to file this with the governor on August 1st. Under federal law, under ESEA, the state education agency is required to transmit the plan to the governor's office 30 days before submitting it to the U.S. Department of Education. So the governor's executive order only moves that timeline up by about 2 weeks. But until it's filed, it's my impression that this is a draft, and this is still a working draft until it's any comments are collected from the governor's office, any comments from the board members are collected, and any other issues are addressed as we finish the document.
And one thing that is noteworthy is the fact that the first filing date was in April, and a number of those states have had to respond to concerns from the U.S. Department of Education, so they still don't have confirmed plans as far as approval, and questions have arisen during the process, and we will be among probably a number of states submitting in September, which has in the past certainly was way past the deadline, and I'm thankful that states have had that opportunity to work on plans, and I certainly think we've had the advantage of watching other states and seeing some of the concerns that have been expressed by the department during that process. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, 2 states were asked to withdraw their plan and resubmit because they weren't complete. So I think that the April deadline may have been ambitious for some states. We have obviously learned, as all states do, through this process. For anybody who is unaware, what happens is after a state files their plan, the federal government sends out a peer review team, usually of about 3 officials chosen from academics and state education agencies around the country to review the plans, both in terms of their completeness and in terms of their policies. In past years, that's been a somewhat intrusive process, and there have been some concerns even this time around about the questions that have been raised. Some states, for example, used AP tests as an academic indicator for success, and were told that they couldn't do that. Some states used the International Baccalaureate as an indicator of academic success, and were told that they couldn't do that. One state wanted to use science scores as an academic indicator, and was apparently advised that they shouldn't do that. None of those things, I think, are appropriate under the ESSA law. The ESSA law is quite clear about the U.S. Department of Education's role in reviewing state plans and what they can or cannot do. So there's been a lot of discussion among state chiefs about what exactly the U.S. Department of Education is doing, what they're doing through their peer review process, and what the expectations are for these state plans. We've tried to learn from that. We've had a number of different conversations with other states. I've met with state leaders from other states to review both the process and the progress of their submissions and to talk about common concerns. But I think that this is a solid plan, and I think that it meets what is needed under the ESSA law.
And if you want to review the plans, they are on the U.S. Department of Education's website, and you can compare this draft with the others just to see where we stand in terms of comparisons.
Right, and we have, one of the things that we are trying to be mindful of is that anything that you put in the plan can be reviewed. And so there are things that, we're certainly talking about and thinking about, which may be omitted from the plan, but that's intentional, because we don't want to raise it with the U.S. Department of Education, because once it's raised and once they sign off on it, then you have an obligation, to fulfill it, even if it's not required by federal law.
Madam Chairman, I have a couple of questions. It's a big report, or it's obvious that you and your staff have done a ton of work. I'm at page 13, and I note that here at page 13, you have a long description of how the minimum number of students is statistically sound at 20, because that was in the presentation, but 20 seemed like a small number to me, but it is explained here. You're confident that 20 is the right number for the subgroup?
I think that when we look at both our populations in the state and what the practice is in other states, I think that 20 is a completely defensible number. There have been some states that have suggested 30, but I think that 20 is reasonable.
Okay. I agree. I was at page 15, and I highlighted that Alabama, right in the middle, Alabama has been diligently engaging stakeholders in conversations surrounding the selection of academic and school quality or student success indicators. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think that's really important.
Where are you in that?
I'm looking at page 15, right in the middle.
Sorry.
And the level of engagement that's happened.
Well, we do this both formally and informally. I mean, the ESSA committee has had an extensive body of work, not only in terms of the breadth of their committees and subcommittee structure, but also, and the number of conversations that they've had, but also they've had a number of different presentations around the state. We've outlined that in the plan itself, how many of that has happened. But we're also engaged, obviously, informally with the stakeholders to have these conversations about what is appropriate. That's an ongoing process.
Thank you for that. Academic indicators at page 20 and 21. This is that top paragraph at page 21. This is our annual measurements. This refers to our standardized testing? Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So we're gonna tell in our plan what we're going to say we're going to do is measure in grades 3 through 8. And then again in high school.
Right.
We don't commit to a certain year in high school.
Right.
Okay. This paragraph right here, can you explain why this paragraph? I think that's fine. I think we need to have it on record. So it's going to be grades 3 through, and that's going to be the same whether it's previously ACT Aspire and now Global scholar?
Right, well, we're going to have 3 through 8 and use global or Scantron
Right.
for those assessments. We're going to be using, next year, the plan is to use ACT as the secondary test. And then whether we use that going forward, I think is still something for conversation with the board and with the constituencies, what tests we're using and how we're structuring that and so forth. I don't know, there's no research that I can cite to you that says that, having multiple assessments in high school is better for a state.
Right.
In other words, if we had a test in 10th grade and then the ACT exam, I can't say that that's, in some way, better. What I can cite to you for research is that those states that have taken on the ACT or the SAT as their secondary test have seen an increase in the number of kids going on to college. There's several studies that support that, and that I think is a fairly positive thing for the state.
That's fine with me, but we're not committing to a test, we're just committing that we will
Right.
test in 3
Yes.
through 8 and
Yes.
again once, okay.
Right.
I really like this chart at page 22. I thought that it might even be better placed at the very beginning, because to me, it really is the whole thing.
For those who don't know, it's a chart, I assume you're talking
Right.
about the cohort graduation.
Yeah.
Or you talk, oh, the Alabama Ascending,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's at page 22,
And then the one on 22 would be cohort, would be graduation, so which
Alabama
one?
Strategic Plan aligned to ESSA indicators.
Okay,
I thought
21.
it's at page 22.
My printing, we have the same one.
Yeah, they said.
Okay, so that's why I was trying to get some clarification, because yours look like it's a little different from
Yeah.
ours.
This
So that-
one, yeah, it's this one.
That one.
Yeah, it just struck me as I was looking at that, thinking that might be something nice right for the beginning,
Fancy that one.
because it's sort of a pictograph of,
Mine looks like this, I have color. They
I do
don't.
too.
They don't.
yeah, the color,
don't.
color would have been helpful, because there's
pages.
some graphs where you definitely would like color. So that's just an input of mine, for placement,
And that's from the Alabama Ascending Plan, I assume. That's the
Yes.
chart directly from your plan.
So and I guess this is, I don't know if everybody's the same, page 25.
That's good too.
This is a graph that shows our college and career readiness rate. So we are anticipating that we'll be 100% proficient in terms of all our graduates being meeting one indicator of college and career ready. Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay.
By 2020.
Great, by 2022. Great. That's an ambitious goal. So page 27.
Just a footnote on that. We have looked at on a school-by-school basis about this issue, about college and career readiness versus graduates. And there are a whole host of high schools in the state that are already there.
Right.
In fact, somewhat curiously, there were a couple of high schools that had more students who were attaining the CCR indicator, but were not graduating. In other words, they had 105% of their graduates getting a CCR, but but not 100% graduates of the cohort. That's not unusual for some states when you start to align some sort of graduation, expectation that they will in fact attain that level of achievement, but still not graduate for some reason.
For whatever reason.
But there's reason to believe, and as we go forward, you know, I think we're going to be highlighting a number of these high schools in the state simply because they, you know, they're not always the expected, you know, group of high schools, and they ought to be, you know, called out for their commitment to making sure that their students are prepared.
So that would be a situation like a young person gets a industry credential, for example, and then leaves for
Right.
some reason.
Right.
That's great. And then, well, that kind of leads to the back of the, I've got some questions in the middle, but it's this dashboard.
Yes.
Is that is there, the college and career readiness, are they?
What page is that on?
That's at page 70 for me, Stephanie. But is that a dashboard
69.
that all,
It's up to the one behind.
No, 70.
who, oh, sorry, it's this one.
Dr. Thacker, if you could speak to that.
Help us. Who is, Dr. Thacker, who could see this dashboard? Where will it be housed? How will it be kept up to date?
The dashboard board is an AIM portal. It's on the AIM portal. Every high school in the state can see it. It's dependent upon who the superintendent assigns to see it. It's continually up. We update it whenever we get new information in. On the dashboard itself, ACT, IB, AP, and ACT work keys are information that are downloaded from the state to the dashboard. College credit, career tech, and industry credential, or military enlistment, they're uploaded through iNow, and then our accumulator uploads that to the portal every night. So on the last three on this dashboard, that can change on a daily basis.
Okay.
The first four indicators on there are generally downloaded at this point. This is more than you've asked, but we would like to find a way in which all of these could be entered at a local level, so a local principal or superintendent can keep up with their college and career ready rate throughout the course of the year.
Is the dashboard available now?
It's been available for the
Well, this is for another time, but not for the ESSA plan, but I'll talk to you about it later. I don't want to get into that right now, but
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
great. Thank you. And then attendance, Mr. Sentance, on page 27. I don't particularly have any strong thoughts on high school attendance, but we are going to be promising that we're going to monitor attendance. So it's going to be only for elementary and middle, or just elementary?
I think, well,
Grades without a 12. So that would be elementary and middle.
right, I think it's, well, to be honest with you, I think we're monitoring attendance in all schools. But
Right.
I think it's a focus for the elementary and middle schools and graduation rate for the high schools generally.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. And then all the charts in the back, are these, there's
What
a number,
page?
yeah, starts on page 63 for me.
And 62, I think. for
Yeah.
this other.
And these are all out of our strategic planning committee efforts and what we've said, or were these generated just for the purpose of ESSA? Because they seem to, it's numbers and graphs that I feel like I've seen before.
Can you speak to that? I can't.
Sorry, Tony, maybe you just stay in the front.
Just stay there.
Essentially, you've seen something very similar to this. In our ESEA, we had the same type of goal. We wanted to reduce the gaps by 50% by point or date certain. That's exactly what is in the ESSA plan as well, and if you look at these charts towards the end, what they want to ensure is throughout this process that the gaps between subgroups shrink over the course of the time that we implement the ESSA plan. This graph is to visually show that over the course of the time that we're implementing our ESSA plan, that the gaps between subgroups do indeed shrink. So you see that the, combined proficiency, reading proficiency, math proficiency, all of those shrink, and graduation rate subgroups shrink. So it was just a visual way of showing something that's already in language within the plan.
Well, I love it. It's a great commitment to make, because we're raising achievement of all, and we're shrinking the achievement gap.
One of the things that is required under the ESSA plan is to have ambitious educational goals,
Okay.
and to ensure that that's true for all subgroups. So that's the reason why this is, highlighted here. And there's also been some early experience on the reviews that peer reviewers have sent back plans or commented unfavorably on plans because the goals weren't seen as being ambitious enough.
Sure.
We think that these are ambitious. We also think that, given how we've set this out in an incremental fashion, that they are achievable over time.
Well, I like that we're making an external commitment to raising achievement and closing gaps. That's incredibly important for our state. I'm going to leave aside the Montgomery piece a second. I have some questions about that might be better offline.
Can we just focus on this plan
Yes.
specifically? Anybody else have questions?
I think Cynthia does. Go ahead.
I actually have not finished yet.
Can we go ahead and
Can
she
we
may
just-
ask, okay.
Can I please finish my questions? I don't have much further.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
just, we want to make sure everybody has time.
I don't know if this is, I think I read it pretty thoroughly, and I'm not sure this is the right place for it, but yesterday I was in Florence, and we had at their professional development day for teachers in Florence and all around Florence, and we had it was a PD day on data literacy, and is there anything in here about, because data literacy is a problem in our state, and are we making any commitments about data literacy and helping our systems to be able to understand how to use the data that they're getting to inform instruction?
It's not in this plan because, again, it's not required by federal law. So, but it is clearly part of the strategic plan for the state. It's part of one of those things that we've talked about internally when we talked about micro-credentialing and specifically talking about it in terms of administrators. That we've talked about incorporating that into our near-term plans for a credential for administrators.
That's great. Okay, so we're not committing to it here, but we are internally
Yes.
committing to it. Is there value in making an external commitment in order that we make sure that we do it? Because that's such a critical piece of us getting.
Let's stick to
improving. Is there?
if we can stick to the plan, and I don't disagree, and I appreciate. Do you have another question about the
I
plan
do.
itself?
I'd like to know: is there value in making an external commitment?
Well, here's the issue. We've got if we start to talk about for peer reviewers, to see whether or not they think that it's somehow sufficient. And the second thing is that the document that we submit becomes binding upon the state education agency upon approval. So if it's locked into that, there's just a risk in terms of that. Mm-hmm. And this is at a time when the federal government is uncoupling its commitment to teacher and educator quality. They are defunding Title II, which is the program for enhancing teacher and administrative quality. If we had a better understanding of a common interest, then perhaps it might be more appropriate. But right now there's an obligation without support. So we have to be thoughtful.
And Cynthia, now you have some questions, I understand.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Thank you for everybody that worked on this. This is a very professional document, and it is ambitious. And that is, like you said, one thing they asked us to be was ambitious. But I have a few requests, a few comments, and a few areas of clarification. And a request would be, and I know we've done this with our committees and such, but for all stakeholders to please read this online. I understand it's on the website. Please read and give us feedback. And I would say especially those who are involved in those committees, the math, science, and ELA committees, if they would read through this and make sure that it adheres to what they presented when they presented their reports to us. I would also ask, there is a great deal in this report about our ELL students. And my particular district has many of those students. You also have a teacher on your teacher cabinet, Jennifer Fernandez, who is adept at understanding the needs of our ELL students. And I would put forth Jim Cunningham and Rick Ayers from Albertville and Fort Payne, as well as people to reach out because they have experience with these students. With the migrant students, Jenny Seals, St. Clair County, she has these migrant students. I'm sure others do too, but I'd love to hear what her input is with what we've set forth in this. Mary Scott, you mentioned PD. I would also like to mention PD. Shanti and I are serving on a committee for the in-service center standards right now, and we would love to put what we're discussing in this document. Mega Conference is always a success. I appreciate so much what they do at Mega. I saw that I think we have a little over 2,000 teachers participate, which that's a large number, right? That's fantastic. And I know that many of the workshops there in PD, they were high quality and rigorous and great for our teachers. But we have over 50,000 teachers in the state. So we just have to make sure that we're doing all we can to provide quality, relevant, robust, embedded, data-driven PD for our teachers. So if we can beef up that section, that might be good. Also, and this may be, Mr. Sentance, one of those things that you said that we might not want to put into our plan, but I'll just toss it out for consideration. We know that student absenteeism is a problem. If you're not there in school, you can't learn. But we also know that teacher absenteeism is a problem, and it's growing because of our change in our benefit structure. And Dr. Mackey, I think you addressed it at a work session earlier. The change now means that what they can't roll over their days and that kind of thing. But anyway, it's, again, we need the students and the teachers to be there in school. Again, that may be something that we don't want to put in there, but I just toss it out for consideration. Let's see. On my page 26, I just have a question for clarification. And it may be 25, I think, for the rest of you. But it's the weights. This part is at the lower part of the page, bottom half. And it's proposed weights for indicators. 26. And the progress in ELP. I wasn't quite sure because some of our schools don't have that. So I wasn't sure how to consider that as a weight of 15%. So could I get clarification on that?
Yes, I know, I'm looking for.
44, 15, 5, 27, 15, 5, 10.
For the 15% on the ELP, if it's not a subgroup in that particular area, they're not charged against it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That I just wanted to be clear because I know some schools have significant numbers, others have virtually none. So it must be a subgroup for it to be counted. Okay, thank you. I also am interested in this idea of weighted allocations and academies. And now is probably not the time, but at some time I'd love to have more of a discussion on that if possible. And one last thing that I'll say, well, I've got two last things, sorry. Next to the last is, I remember that the English committee, when they were reporting, they said that currently in our certification efforts, we don't really have a way to assess if our teacher candidates can effectively teach reading. That the Praxis test does not do that, the one we currently use. And so I would just ask if we could.
There is, on the elementary and middle level, there is a test just for the teaching of reading.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. And
but on the high school level, because we talk about the areas of math, science, English, and social studies, there's so much reading involved. There's not a separate reading test for that area.
Okay, well, just if we can just be sure that it's in here, and it may be. Okay. I'm just, if we could do that. Last question I have is the assessment piece.
Can I just go back on that?
Sure.
For a second? It's not in here, and it's designed not to be in here, because we don't have HQT as part of the
and what's HQT?
Highly qualified teachers.
Highly qualified teachers was a provision in NCLB, and it required the assessment of teachers, both in subject matter and in literacy as part of that process. As a result, because Congress moved very, very deliberately away from any of that, it is not specifically in the plan, because it's not in the act.
Okay. One last question, and that is with assessments. We agreed last time to move to Scantron for 3 through 8, but I believe we were also mentioned in one of the work sessions, and Tony, it may have been you that did it, about starting to craft and to write form an RFP for an assessment in the future, not for this upcoming year, but in the future. And my request would be is that we get stakeholder input, educators all across the state to weigh in to what are the factors most important for us to look for as we search for the very best assessment for our students.
I have a few things, and mine were some duplicates, so I'm weeding that out. Mine are just a few clarifications that I just needing to ask. And so on page 15 with number 2, where we talked about that last, where the new baselines will be determined after the rollout of our new accountability assessment, is that going to page 39? It mentions the ACT Aspire in particular. Is that a conflict? Should that one be changed, or are we alluding to what had been in the past to what is supposed to be in the future? It would be A, almost in the middle of the page on 39.
That's 38 on my page.
I'm sorry. Mine was the one that came in overnight delivery.
Yeah, the gap is just
I'm saying on F.
right.
I didn't see an answer. I know this is picky, but I thought that's something that they could. Because I think that is just a question that was asked of us. That meant I read carefully. And then, hang on. Sorry. Wait, I have one more, so sorry. I had used little pieces here. On page 42, which is probably your 41. Do you see where under 1 it said attachment 1 and it had But when you go down to the last, my appendix did not have an indicator of a number or a letter, so I did not know.
It is blank.
It's blank, so that just needs to have something added to it.
Oh, I see.
Okay, sorry, there you go.
Mr. Newman?
Yes, just one quick comment. I want to reinforce some of what Dr. McCarty said about the involvement of our local teachers and the people that's actually doing the job. I mean, you know, because me as superintendent, when I was superintendent, a lot of times I'd go visit schools, different schools and all, and I went to elementary school. When I walked into that elementary school, I really wasn't the superintendent. I was talking to the experts, the principal there, the teachers there. They were the experts. They knew 10 times more than I did about anything else. And that's why I caution all of us when we write plans like this. We have to involve the people that's actually doing it. You know, these teachers, because they are the experts. It reminds me of when I was building my house, and I had my builder and my architect both there. And the house plans was drawn up, and that builder pointed out that the architect could draw things that the builder said you cannot build. So that's why it's so important to get that input from the local level. You know, we don't want to draw something that can't be built.
Good analogy.
It really is.
Thank you.
It actually does. Did you have?
Yes, yes. Oh, you have anything else? Okay. All right, well, I agree with what you just said, Mr. Newman. Just a couple of comments. Mayor Scott, I know you were talking about the data literacy and being a problem. I just wanted to clarify something. With the inception of ARI years ago, schools began doing what was known as data-driven instruction. Terminology is changing now. So where you hear data literacy, it may give the impression that some schools or school districts are not utilizing data, but the vast majority, I would say, are. I just wanted to clarify that on behalf of teachers, and I know I did.
I'm aware of that, but what I find in my district is that there's all of them want to do data-driven instruction effectively. I believe that, but there's varying levels of all of them have complete ability. There's just varying levels of expertise within the schools, and that causes differences in the ability to drive instruction at the local level. So it's not that it's not there, and I'm aware of, yesterday was all about data-driven instruction, but it's just, there's varying levels of acumen out there, and I think that's going to be part of our professional development efforts as far as I know.
Because we talked about that in the work session. Yes.
I'd like to comment that also. The longer I sit here, the more talk, so we don't need to do this. But anyway, a prime example of that is when the reading initiative first started. It was totally data-driven. The students took the DIBELS test, everything. It was individually data-driven. And those test scores shot up like crazy. When it was first implemented, you had the Sweet 16, and those reading coaches were actually going into the classroom with individual students, individual data, and addressed that way. I've been in it a long time, and we've always been disaggregation of data, but the data changes. That's why the professional development is so important, because the data changes, the way we collect it changes. And Jackie, I know you from a principal, you've seen it time and time again also, how the data we continue to get in different forms and all, and that's why it takes that professional development for the teachers. But we've always had data-driven instruction.
You just always have to, excuse me, the new ones, what I always call the newbies. And so it's always ongoing. You always have new parents, you have new grandparents, you have new stakeholders. So it's a never-ending process.
That's correct. All right, I also wanted to compliment those in looking at the 3 tiers of support. I'm very familiar with the targeted, where we looked at target subgroups. Okay, it's page 26 on mine, maybe 25 on some others. But I'm aware where we've had the targeted services, where you look basically at student subgroups, and the comprehensive services, which we called, I think, Ms. Washington, priority schools. Would that be correct? But I want to compliment the foundational services, that tier being brought in where all districts would get support and get things to help them as far as improving their schools. But I have one question on page 30 under resource allocation review. Which may be 29 on some, where it says the Office of School Improvement Turnaround will review resource allocations. I understand about the annual review of progress, parents, feeder patterns, assessments, which may be 29 on some, where it says the Office of School Improvement Turnaround. Would not the assessments and all of that perhaps be the root cause analysis? Can you answer that, Dr. Wright? I don't understand how that differs so much from feeder patterns, parents, et cetera, assessments, root cause analysis. What is that supposed to indicate?
Something that can be done through our audit purposes that we have an audit team at the state office, so they end up reviewing schools and districts and determining some urban areas for goals, so that we do a forensic analysis of all operations in the school, determine what the root causes are, that helps inform how we finish our priority areas.
Okay, so then to also incorporate everything else that's down here about the assessments, would that be a part of it? Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Any more questions?
No, that's it.
Well, do you have any questions?
You know, let me tell you something, I was looking and I said, boy, this is so full of analysis and all this. And I will tell you straight up, I have not read this document. I just got back into the city and I was gone without my computer purposefully, et cetera. But as I have scanned the document, as we've asked the questions, I came to a point on my page 39 that speaks about the strategies for helping to increase our high school graduation rates. In my district, of course, I have lots of rural areas, and I'm trying to figure out how we can successfully craft programs in after-school academics, tutoring, summer school, credit accrual, and or school tutoring to make sure that our kids are kept up to date. I'm aware that even in the best of schools in this state, there are after-school programs, there are Saturday programs, et cetera, that are not necessarily offered to traditional schools, and certainly not the strategies that are presented here. And I was wondering if there was some kind of plan in place now, or are we developing those plans on how rural kids will be able to take advantage of these very, very needed supports in their public education?
You want to talk to that, Shantia, Barbara?
Yes, Ms. Bell. We will be working with and have had a lot of talks around rural schools and what the needs are for rural schools. In saying that, there has been a growing number of initiatives across the United States relative to what needs to occur with rural schools. One of those is an actual initiative that is the Rural Community Schools Initiative, and we've had some dialogue and discussion relative to that, because that was one of the actual initiatives that we used at one point in time, even in the Black Belt area. We had individuals to come in and actually work under that auspices of determining what would be some good resources, good strategies to actually use in rural schools. So that is one of those things that they didn't ask in here, but definitely is a part of our strategic plan.
Let me say something. I serve on the board of the Black Belt Community Foundation, and they have just received an awesome grant, and it's supposed to be about improving dialogue, reducing instances of racism, that kind of stuff in the Black Belt. But I can imagine that education would be an absolute basis for such kinds of things, or that could at least be created an educational tie-in with that. I would love to see you contact the director, Ms. Felicia Lucky. I was almost about to say Felicia Jones, because, well, Felicia Lucky, to see if there's any way we can develop some kind of way that we can help to get into the schools in the Black Belt and improve those areas, tutorials and after-school programs and Saturday programs, those kinds of things for children of the Black Belt.
Yes, ma'am. I'll take care of it.
Thank you. And it's noteworthy to say that Shantia Washington served on the governor's appointed committee assigned directly to work directly with ESSA, and you were up there. I attended a number of those meetings, and you were up there right in front, helping with the presentations and guiding the process. So thank you. Jim?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Peters, did you have any comments
No,
or
I was
questions?
just saluting her.
Oh, no, you're the only one who hasn't said something so far, so I just wanted to open up the opportunity.
Thank you, I appreciate the opportunity. You know, all these questions are very
They're good. And really, do you have anything else to add, Mr. Sentence? At this point, I do have a question, and you already mentioned part of the answer. As far as the board is concerned, I know that you have mentioned your plans for us to vote on this state plan, but it would be, I think, appropriate for the board to have another opportunity for a presentation in a work session before that vote, after the governor has made some changes perhaps, and before we are asked to vote on the plan.
Sure.
And if you'll just let us know as soon as possible so that we can arrange our schedules if we need to have another special meeting for that purpose. Ms. Peters?
Would we need to allow a certain amount of time to emphasize the need for input from out in the local
Oh, yes,
schools?
and that's the point of saying that it's on the website, and that's a
Put
very
it
good
in
point.
red or flashing lights or something.
Right there in the middle.
They're busy and they might miss it.
But it is important to have, I agree, everyone has emphasized that, and I agree 100% with the need for input at every level, and especially the parents and those in the trenches who are actually going to carry out any plan that we discuss and then ultimately approve. But with that said, do you have anything else to add about this in our work session?
No, obviously the ESSA work committee had been soliciting comment from the field for a number of months, as well as having public hearings about this. So there's been a great deal of interaction with the field about the plan as it came forward. And the document that was presented to the board in November, incorporated those comments and discussions, and again, that was a foundation document for this plan.
Of course, now we have your addition with the Alabama Ascending Plan, and that you've already presented to the board, so people need to know that it has been changed, and certainly
sure.
Their input is...
But just one last chance for input. We may have
and it
some
has
new
changed,
teachers
so it will be
and
new.
stuff.
I agree, definitely. And with that said, and thank you so much for your report, and the others who participated and answered questions, and board members, thank you.
Could I ask one question?
Certainly.
I had asked before about having a vote on the standards.
We're not there.
No, you said bring
No,
that
right now we have another item on the agenda.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so
okay.
we need to address that because we're pressed for time.
Yeah, okay.
And it's only because we are thankful that you're here safely, and
thank you.
It's worth the extra time to ensure that
I appreciate that.
Is the result of the end of your trip here. But as a result, we're running about 15 minutes behind. But we do have on the agenda today a discussion of the committee appointed at the work session. For those of you who attended the work session, you know that I asked Dr. Richardson, Dr. McCarty, and Mr. Newman to serve on a committee to draft a proposed policy for procedures for the Alabama State Board of Education relative to communication with the state board attorneys, those outside board attorneys. And with that, I'll just turn it over to the one you designated as your spokesperson and chair.
Okay. All right. Board members, what you see, it has a draft on it because these were just 3 basic ideas that the committee had come up with, and I'd like for you to look at these 3. There may be some others that you'd like for us to add. This has not been set in stone. You may not like the wording, and if not, just let us know how you want to change it. But the first one, individual board members seeking assistance for the development of legal documents that will require board approval will be afforded the opportunity to seek guidance from the attorneys after the information is vetted by the Vice President. The second one, and we'll go back if you have discussion or concern on the first one. Items needing board approval regarding legal matters should be submitted to the attorneys by the Vice President. The last one, routine matters/issues, should normally be addressed by the department staff unless it is connected to board litigation. So if you would just look at those three, if you'd like something added, please let us know. And again, Dr. McCarty and Mr. Newman, we all served on this subcommittee together.
What are the rates?
The normal rate, as I understand, is still $195 as the cap, I would assume. Having looked at some, and answered that question, talking about the per hour rate.
Yeah, what are the per hour, what's the rate?
I think it's, the cap is still $195. At one point, it was, and certainly our legal staff and others can answer that question, but my understanding is that a former governor issued an executive order placing a cap on the per hour rate. Darnell, do you have an answer? Darnell has been asked to work with the board directly.
And Ms. Hunter, I'm sorry, we weren't charged with that, so that's why none of us know
it's
the
not
answer.
that, it's not.
We were only told to look at procedures as to how we dealt with them.
And it will
someone else
change.
would have to answer that question.
It will certainly change.
I just wanted you to know that.
I would propose that we, if we're going to use outside counsel, we would come up with I always negotiate outside counsel rates.
But we can't do that because there's a process that's required within state government, but perhaps we can have those questions answered.
Good afternoon. I'm Darnell Coley. I'm one of the Associate General Counsels, and the rate for the partners is $300, and the rate for the associates is $225 per hour.
So it's what?
$225 per hour for the associates and $300 for the partners.
What do we pay that when we do work, when our general counsel does work and goes outside our system? What is the rate that she pays?
$225 an hour for the associates and $300 for the regular.
Any more questions?
How do we decide? For example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 lawyers in attendance today for the better part of an hour when there's been no business conducted on this issue. How do we decide how do we decide who attends, how many attend? I mean, that seems to be...
I understand your question, and I'm certainly aware of some other situations where we've looked out and there have been multiple attorneys representing individuals. So that is perhaps, although it is, I'm not certainly not discounting your question, but I don't think it's appropriate according to the policy that's being presented. This is just an individual policy because outside counsel is being used for a reason, and we just don't want to.
I can understand that. You see, in my business, I negotiate outside counsel rates and work all the time. That's what I do as inside counsel.
Well, I know.
So I have the floor.
Wait.
I have the floor. I have some additional questions.
You ask a question, and I'm trying to answer it. I have looked at a number of documents relative to billing, and I have 3 thick notebooks that I've requested. I know Ms. Bell has also requested that information, and you are certainly welcome to look at the information, and I will share that with all the other board members. Give examples of different situations recently where billing has been very definitely done without the knowledge of the board. But that said, I did point out that type of discussion, I have not discussed any type of contract or discussion. I do have some concerns about a contract being held up, and even though the board has requested that we have outside counsel, and we even as a board voted to support hiring outside counsel, even to the point of specific names, and for that reason, we can have that discussion but at the same time, we need to discuss other matters that where the board has no knowledge about monies being spent. Now, that again is outside the purview of what we are supposed to be discussing. If you want to
Madam Chair,
discuss these issues,
could we perhaps have that as another item at another time?
Yes, we will.
Because Mary Scott, what she brought to my attention is that we have attorneys that we've been paying for personally for individuals. That the cost, when she added up yesterday, has come to about $20,000. And we as board members totally are not aware of that. So I think that would be better served as another item at another time. Really, because I think board members need to be aware of money that we're paying and are not aware of. Because
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, we have that information.
I will provide that information, but let's get back to the questions at hand.
Right.
And that is the policy that the committee has provided for your consideration.
Okay.
And if you've noted that the term was used vice president, because I think it's appropriate in this case, since the vice president position is fluid. For a reason, I think it needs to be designated because, again, I have to emphasize, this is legal counsel for the board as a whole. And matters such as, I think the example, if you can give the examples about your third bullet point, where the routine, some examples there.
So
wait, let me go back to what, let's be.
Well, I have some questions at some point.
Okay,
Just
let me know when
I can ask them.
Let's respect each other's time and the fact that let's stick to, and I strayed simply because I was trying to respond to your question, and I apologize.
Okay, well, when you're ready, I have some more questions.
All
Just
right.
let me know.
Okay. I'll let you direct those individually to Mr. Newman, Dr. McCarty, and Dr. Richardson from here on.
Okay. The routine matters about, in reference to department staff, for example, the resolutions where we commend our teachers in certain districts, that would continue, those, those kinds of things. We wouldn't, basically submit that to our board attorneys for that. That's what she meant on 3. Okay. There's another question.
So going back to number 1, when is it, so individual board members can contact Mr. Gillis's firm and seek advice. I understand that. Now, in the billing, will it be reflected which board member contacted?
Well, you have that part about the assistance for the development of documents that will require board approval. However, based upon it being vetted first by the vice chair, so it would show the name.
So the vice chair we would contact the vice chair, and the vice chair would be the one that would seek advice.
That's a recommendation that's out there. If you'd like it changed, let us know.
No, I think that's a good recommendation. So individual board members, the problem that you run into is that, for example, in my company, I am the conduit for outside counsel. I don't have people all over the company calling outside counsel. I think that's a good thing. And the problem that local boards get into sometimes is that everybody's calling the lawyer. Yes. And that's not a good thing. And so I do think that we ought to either have the billing reflected that whoever's calling them, the lawyer, that be reflected in the billing. Or that only the chairman or the vice president be the one contacting the lawyers and managing the outside counsel fees and expenses. And for example, how many lawyers are showing up, how many, that would be something that I would submit that the chairman manage. Because I think that can get away from you in a hurry. That's been my experience as inside counsel, managing outside counsel.
I just have got to say something.
Well, wait, let's go back to Mr.
That's
Newman.
the purpose of these recommendations, exactly what you just restated, read them. When we go, like it's going to pertain to the whole board, issue pertain to the whole board. To me, I'm like you said, you as the conduit, well, Ms. Bell's our conduit, she's vice president. And, after contacting, I do believe it's going to pertain to the whole board. If you ask a question and you get a response, it should be communicated to all board members.
I agree.
So.
That's the purpose, and that was the reason why I appointed the committee, and I appreciate your time and effort because I know it's not an easy process, and I think you've covered every potential problem that we could face.
Truthfully, I try to stay away from all this.
No, it's a
Well, I don't.
That's the goal.
My daughter.
I love them, but I'm married to one. My daughter is one, so it's we have a couple of lawyers in there.
You say that basically the members of the board, if they have problems or concerns that outside counsel can help us with, we need to funnel them through the vice chair in order to be able to ask.
To vet it, just to make sure that we're not all calling all the time. Well, I hope you won't have any problems.
I know, I hope so too, but suppose I do. Suppose I do. I don't like to think, I love the idea of having a vice chair. We need someone to do things like that. But, all of us are here representing constituencies of over 500,000 people.
Right.
I just got a problem with the fact that I've got to go through somebody if I have a question. And the reason, people say, well, why do you need outside counsel? I said, my reason was because one time I asked Juliana a question and she couldn't answer me. You understand? If she can't answer me, then I need my own counsel.
Well,
I don't need, I don't need anybody else. And
well, personally, I think it's appropriate because the board hired as a whole, hired outside legal counsel, and we just have to be careful. And I think the policy is helpful in that certainly there's transition in vice president position. So it's not like one person will be sitting as vice president for a long time. And as you have seen in the meetings, and I know Dr. Richardson's done that, you did that. Jeff, I could go down the long list of those who've served. The purpose is to, in every meeting, give everyone an opportunity, an equal opportunity to respond and share concerns. But at the same time, that is the objective with this policy. So I wouldn't worry about it. I don't. When you're vice president again, I know that you'll be fair with me. So.
And we are. But let me tell you something. It's for me. It is about this whole thing about control. I just have a problem with people controlling my ability to serve the folk that I represent. I do have that problem.
I don't think you have to worry about that.
All right. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll surely
but
see.
If you have a problem, you can certainly appeal it to the board as a whole, and I think that would be appropriate. But our purpose is to ensure, as Mary Scott has asked about, and she's expressed the concern, which I share, in that we don't have someone calling. Plus, I know outside counsel has other cases, and certainly limited time in terms of having to meet obligations that the court set for them in various cases. So we want to also respect our outside counsel in the process. But thank you.
Could I get a point of clarification?
Yes.
The bullet points make a reference to legal documents and legal matters. Now, the ESSA plan is a legal document. It is a transactional document between the state education agency and the federal government. I'm just trying to understand.
I think that would be down as far as an issue. I mean, it's not routine, but every year we're going to be doing it. I think that would go through the department staff. I don't think that would.
Third bullet.
Yes.
That's kind of the thought.
That's day-to-day operation.
Running it through the vice president, because then the VP can, we're all in agreement, general counsel can.
Right, because that's day-to-day operation. We're not dealing with that.
Thank you. And thank you, committee. And that's a perfect intro to the transition with our regular meeting. If board
Stephanie, there's one other question I want to have. Does the code speak to us having our own counsel?
You're talking about Alabama statute? Specifically, that's a very good question, and there is a process through the AG's office for approval outside counsel.
Okay.
But I don't know that it prohibits it. I'm asking perhaps
I had
Donnell or legal counsel?
specifically that it did, but I haven't found specifically where it does not, so
Mhm.
I don't know,
Yeah,
that
and
just
that's-
leaves us.
Board members, I won't support this unless it has negotiated rates included. I won't vote for this unless it has negotiated rates. We've got to, that's where you start when you're dealing with outside counsel. That's the starting point. Anytime I've ever done outside counsel, negotiated rates and negotiated work. So without rates that are negotiated and clearly stated.
I would have to put that in the category of something that our legal department would have to handle. And Darnell, if you would like to take on that responsibility, because the board is not in a position to negotiate certain contracts. We do have a contract with our employee, Mr. Sentence, but otherwise I think we have to be careful about how we proceed in that area. We're a little different from your situation with Intuitive. But with that, I'd like to...
just for the record, we negotiate rates all the time.
I know, but your
The
business.
government
I'm
negotiates rates all the
not
time.
questioning, but that's where we allow for our department personnel, and I won't debate that, but because it's really...
Well, rates and the work and who's going to do the work.
I know exactly what you're referring to. That's why we allow for our department to handle that.
Excuse me, Madam Vice President. May I request for the work session that we have in August, that item be placed on the agenda about utilization of outside counsel?
Yes.
And the fact that we, as, I guess, the state, basically, not just us, have paid for those services,
Yes.
and we have not been aware.
So you're talking about on the work session itself?
Yes, the work session itself,
Okay, and this-
so that we may discuss that and get the information in the large notebooks you
Yvette,
referenced.
what are you talking about?
She's talking
We'll
about the
send
information I referred to regarding some of the legal fees. And if we need to go into executive session, if they're that sensitive, but I do think that it's worthy of the board's
I'm not sure how that's
review.
relevant. That's not handled by this
because it goes under
department.
the
That's
same
handled
category
by
of
risk
paying
management,
bills.
not by this department. It's
Well,
obvious what that is. But thank you.
Anyway, we'll
Appreciate
discuss,
that.
we will put that on the agenda and.
It's very obvious what that is.
Anyway.
What is it?
Okay.
We'll
Well,
find
that's an issue about outside.
Sorry about that. But I think we need to move on. And at this point, we will, if you would like a break, we can break.
Do we have any coffee?
This meeting is concluding. Can we mention the possibility of
Certainly.
repealing the Common Core?
You mentioned Mr. Sentence, and you discuss that with him, and he will put it on the agenda at the appropriate time at the next work session. That's something that you have to go through our designated person. Obviously, he's going to have to handle the academics.
Okay.
I want to agree with Betty on that. I really would like to see that discussed.
I've got just kind of an odd question that's not related to anything.
Okay.
And probably some of we've got 3 people who've been superintendents would know. I've had some complaints. I don't know the counselors enough to know the background, but some of them are saying that there are not enough school counselors because, I don't know if this is right or not, that different sized schools will get the same number. And that because of all the testing we have now and all the problems that children seem to be having that are more extensive than used to be, it's just I've been forgetting to ask about.
Well, thank you, and that's another one, Mr. Sentence and staff, please
It
make
may
a
not
record
be.
of both.
It is, there's some places.
And then we can have that
Thank
on the agenda, and any resolutions in the future need to be actually written and produced for the board's reading before, and we would like to get our documents. In this case, thank you for having them on Friday before a Tuesday meeting, but in the past, we've had them no later than Friday before our Wednesday or Thursday meeting. And in the future, if we can have all of the documents, unless there's some type of an emergency situation, in advance, at least Tuesday or Thursday before our Thursday meeting. It's very helpful. You've seen why we need those documents, because the discussion has been certainly more in depth than we've been given the opportunity to share, not because of our board vice president, A little bit of a switch. We actually scheduled it this way, but we are going to start with our work session instead of the regular meeting at 10 o'clock. And I apologize for the delay. We had no, it's not anyone's fault. It's the weather, and I'm thankful you're here safely. We had two board members actually slowed down by traffic and
rain and a wreck.
And that's the same thing that has happened to Dr. Richardson. There is a wreck, a horrible one, where apparently the car turned several times along the interstate. And so thankfully she is safe, but we'll be here shortly. And she is a part of the presentation for the policies regarding the use of outside legal counsel. So we will proceed with Mr. Sentence's estate plan presented for discussion, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Sentence and anyone else who will be making that presentation. The reason why we are holding both the work session and the regular meeting in this particular room is because it's taken, and it also allows for a larger crowd, and I'm thankful that we have this room available. So thank you, Ann, for making those arrangements. Mr. Sentence.
We're not doing the pledge, or?
No, this is actually an agenda for the work session, and we don't normally do a pledge, but it's on the agenda, but we're just going to move right into to the work session. And this is, again, not a voting meeting. This is just our informal work session that we have switched around, but we will hold the meeting at 11:30, which has already been scheduled for that time.
So, good morning. This is doing a bit of an overview of the draft plan that you received the other day. This plan has been in development for more than a year, and so we'll go through what I've tried to do is to highlight some aspects of this, and obviously we have staff here who can help answer questions about aspects of the plan. For those who don't know, the plan follows a template that is set out by the U.S. Department of Education. They provide a document which all states will be using to submit their plans. And it allows the states to fully answer whatever questions that the federal government might require under the Every Student Succeeds Act. But it's also for, I think, most people, a bit of a difficult read because it's written for education staff people in the U.S. Department of Education and for the peer reviewers that the U.S. Department of Education sends out to the states to analyze the documents. The draft of the plan, I think, is available on our website. If don't see Michael at the moment, but I think
this one is thick.
Yeah, I think it's available on the website. It's supposed to be. So as I said, this began over a year ago. There was an executive order that was issued that established a implementation committee. The executive order is attached to the plan as an exhibit, and it's discussed in there about how many, the selection process, who selected them, and so forth. I think the principal chairs of that committee were Secretary Ross, Shanthia Washington from our office, and Superintendent Matt Aiken, and I think they all did a commendable job. That document was presented to, their work was presented to the state board in, if I recall correctly, November. And then, we've been using that document as the foundation for a lot of our work because that group did, I think, exemplary work in pulling together information and resources and consulting with the field about aspects of the plan. In the fall, we set up 3 advisory committees to help develop strategic plans for math, reading, and science. And the convergence of all of this work is what developed the ESSA plan that you have before you. It borrows heavily from the strategic planning committees, but also relies heavily on the work that the ESSA committee did originally. As you know, we are doing this within the context of state education accountability law, and those plans are incorporated into the Act. One of the critical questions that is always in these plans and has been in terms of accountability since NCLB is what is the end size? What is the size of a group of students that's going to be used for any accountability purposes? The ESSA committee recommended 20. Other voices have suggested that perhaps a lower number is more appropriate, but after reviewing both research and what appears to be sort of a common baseline in other states, we held to the size of 20. The ESSA accountability goals were, again, tracked some of the other work that the state has done in past years. And so if you're wondering why, the reductions of 50%, were included, it matches previous statements that the State Department has made to the U.S. Department of Education. In terms of the other indicator for performance, the accountability work group suggested an attendance metric, and I think that if you look at the research, I think that the issue of chronic absenteeism has been one that is a critical issue. Obviously, the higher rate of chronic absenteeism, the more likelihood of a lack of academic success in school, and frankly, a lack of progress within the school community. So by focusing more specifically on that particular metric, I think that it will help to drive success in the future. And we have all of the other, aspects of the state law incorporated into this plan for accountability purposes in terms of differentiation and reporting requirements and so forth. More specifically, in terms of our goals, we borrow from our strategic planning conversations where we talk about raising the cohort graduation rate to 94% by 2030.
Called to order the special called meeting Tuesday, July 25th, actually the time now is 11:55, and again, thank you for your patience because of difficulties for some board members arriving, but we are officially called to order. Madam Secretary, if you will roll call to establish a quorum, please.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Ella Bell?
Here.
Mrs. Stephanie Bell?
Here.
Mrs. Hunter?
Here.
Dr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Newman?
Here.
Mrs. Peters?
Here.
Dr. Richardson?
Present.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Here.
Mrs. Bell, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda? And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of the agenda as presented, please raise your hand. All those opposed and recorded, please. We have one in opposition. The first item, although it's not listed here, will be what is appropriate for today, and that is a prayer. And if you will join me in bowing your heads, we will open, as we always do, with a prayer. Dear Father, we praise your name, and we thank you for your presence today and every day. We thank you for your Son, Jesus, and the fact that we are given life because you provide that life. We ask you for traveling mercies as we leave this meeting, and we thank you so much for the safety, the hedge of protection that you provided to bring everyone here today. We pray for those who were involved in accidents along the way as we traveled here. We pray for guidance, for wisdom, always. And we pray for unity. We pray that you will guide the process that we will be moving through today.
Please, Jesus.
And we pray for the children of this state, for those who provide opportunities through education, and the fact that they are the focus of, and should be the focus of, everything that we do in the business and the process of our meetings. Every agenda, personal agenda, should be put aside. And as we go into this meeting, we pray for wisdom. We pray for the words that you will guide us to use. Again, I thank you so much for the opportunity to serve the state of Alabama, and I thank you for all those who are here at the table, for each board member who has made that same commitment and the sacrifices that those who are in the trenches make on a daily basis. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
And if you'll join me in praying, stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Addressing action items for today, item D, as approved by the board on the agenda, we have item 1 under D, unfinished business. Mr. Sentance, do you have anything to offer as far as unfinished business?
No.
Item D2, new business. The first item for discussion and adoption is item DA, 2A, policies for Alabama State Board of Education's use of outside legal counsel. As you know, for those who were here, we have just discussed that as a board. Any motion?
Move approval.
We have a motion, a second.
Second.
All those in favor, is there any discussion regarding the policy that was just presented? We have had a discussion. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand.
Madam Vice Chair, I'd just like to say that if people have additions they'd like to make, we come back and discuss those, and we can add those also.
And that's an excellent point. I very much appreciate, again, your work on the committee and the fact that it is fluid in terms of the board's ability to amend and change.
I'd like to add that I'm certainly not going to vote for a fluid document in terms of our negotiated outside counsel agreement. That's certainly not what I'm going to vote for. And without further clarification, especially around rates and communications and numbers of lawyers that are going to show up to meetings and be working on projects, I can't support this document.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hunter, for your comments. And when I need to clarify, so thank you for pointing that out. The term fluid actually refers to the fact that the board, not an individual, board member, can return to this table, and we will do it, certainly with the approval of the board. Nothing would be done without the board having a full discussion and certainly a vote on the policy. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please signify. We have one vote duly noted, and thank you very much for your work on this matter. The second item of business is item 2D2B, State Superintendent Evaluation. I have a short presentation, very short, and then I will call on immediately, without discussion, call on Mr. Lewis Gillis, our board attorney.
I object to having, I'm not sure how far
We
we're
don't
going
have a
with
motion
it.
on the table, but let me make a presentation, and then once we have a motion on the table, then we can provide that discussion. Just to give some history and address some comments that have been made, and we'll stick with the August 11th, 2016. Some comments have been made in the media regarding the fact that this has never been done. That's a direct quote. But I want to point out that having served with 4 state superintendents, hired each and gone through the process in terms of evaluation, the point that has to be made is that every state superintendent has had a different contract. And we, several board members, one in particular who made that comment, actually served with one state superintendent. And they were correct in that we've never done that because that contract for the former state superintendent did not actually require an evaluation. In that particular situation, and I went through, I checked the documents, the records, the minutes, every item that could be researched, including newspaper articles, and as a course during that tenure of the superintendent, there was no completed evaluation process. One meeting included a discussion of an extension that was brought to the board by a former governor, and at the same time, not only the 2-year extension was approved by a majority of the board, but also a pay raise. And that is certainly the prerogative of the board based on that state contract, which I have a copy of right here, and certainly can be researched on your own. The other process, we had the beginning of an evaluation process because the board actually made the request for an evaluation. The forms were filled out, the evaluation was completed by the board, but it was never completed ultimately and provided and returned in terms of a composite by the governor's office. And for that reason, we've certainly never done it that way. And I'd like to get into the current situation. The current situation, and again, we have a document, and I'm requesting that the secretary not only provide this document in the minutes of the meeting, but also that this document be presented on our website so that if anyone has a question, they can go directly to this document, which I have provided to members of the media, and answer to the question. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit to the part that delineates the part about the annual evaluation. And the date, August the 11th, was put up there on the screen. And the fact that the signed document was passed on September 8th, 2016 is significant, and that's in looking at dates. The reason why we're here today discussing an evaluation is because within the document, and if you can go back, Charles, to the part that says annual evaluation, there are 2 ways that the board can deal with an employee in terms of discussion regarding job performance. One, according to this particular contract, and please read it, I think it's important not to take my opinion, but just go to the document itself, that the board actually passed as a whole. The entire board had not only several discussions regarding the document, but Mr. Sentance was also included, and it's all on the record, in the course of the discussion. When he was officially hired by the board on August the 11th, he was kind enough to come to the state and be a part of these discussions and have some input, which is important. that is, again, significant in the fact that the board actually has another, and Mr. Gillis will get into the discussion, but there is another track to take that is provided for in terms of job performance. But the board has already taken the stand and the position that we would have, and thank you, Dr. Richardson, for initiating this, and the board for making it a part of, really, I think it's helpful because the idea of an evaluation is not only to have a discussion from the standpoint of the employer, but to give the employee an opportunity to address concerns. We did that in March in a public discussion, and in that public discussion, which is still on record, it's on video, during a work session, we had interaction with the state superintendent, which is appropriate. So we had an opportunity to address it mid-year. This is an annual evaluation. According to the specifics in the contract, this is the time and the best time really for any kind of discussion. Again, the emphasis is on an evaluation, which is the appropriate course to take, because one route beyond just some other route which is specified in the document, and I think the fair route for anyone and anyone employed at any point who has the experience of really a constant evaluation process. This is specified in the contract. It is, we focus on the word annual, and we are facing the anniversary of not only the hiring, but also passing the contract and beginning the job process, the work. The fact that December 31st is mentioned, it is put in there for a reason, because it's very important to maintain, if you look at the document, it's actually important to maintain that annual evaluation, because the second year in the contract actually has a requirement to, and it has to be met in terms of informing the employee that they will either be remain on the job and request that they do, or the board has concerns. This is a board process, but it's also part of a document that was not only discussed but approved by the board and signed by Mr. Sentance. We have an obligation to proceed in terms of an evaluation process, and let's go to the next document, and again, Mr. Gillis will make more comments that will be helpful. We have let me finish this.
No, point of information at this point, I just wanted to have a chance to say that the board did not get to vote on turning the evaluation. Let me
finish the process before we have questions. There's a reason for this, because this is important. The board does not vote. There's nothing in the contract or the process, but we've already voted because we approved the contract. And what I did in the course of providing not only the evaluation tool more than a week in advance, but also provide a copy of the contract so that you could look at that. This is the board approved, and again, we involved the employee in the process.
That's not the document we received.
That is the document.
No,
it doesn't have a
document.
document.
We received that said the word draft on it.
I know, because it is a document that came from, it would accompany the minutes of the meeting. It is the official document, and the reason why it did, if you notice, draft also had the dates crossed through, and at the bottom it says adopted. And so the document that you received was directly delivered from our board secretary, and it was taken out of the files along with the minutes of the meeting. The fact that we had discussed this tool, and I think it was appropriate. We had not done that before, which was part of the problem in the past with the former superintendent immediately proceeding.
Let me go back to... This is not the document that we received. We received a document that said draft on it.
Well, the draft, it also had the dates and the cross-through, so...
Well, yeah, but it said draft.
Well,
Okay,
it is the document taken from the files, but the bottom line is the draft was also included the word adopted, and it says December the 8th, 2016. The evaluation tool does not accompany the actual contract, but this is a tool that we changed specific to the current superintendent with his, he actually was a big part of our discussion because we wanted him to be, and you were there, so it's appropriate. But again, we go back, we already passed.
What's appropriate?
To bring in Mr. Sentance in the discussion of his evaluation tool.
When was he brought in?
During the process.
Which process?
The process of creating the evaluation. And it's documented.
In the most recent process, when did he learn about this?
No, he learned to, again, an evaluation, it's not out of the ordinary. It's something.
Again, what?
Okay, excuse me.
I mean, I'm just trying to understand.
I don't like to bang that because I prefer not to, but you're out of order, frankly. But we will continue, and I will answer your questions. If you've listened, I've already answered the first question, Ms. Hunter, and that was the board.
I'm just trying to understand.
Ms. Hunter, thank you. The contract was actually your validation of the process. You voted, you had the opportunity, if you voted against it, perhaps you didn't like the process, but it was the board's process that was approved.
Well, I like the process, that's fine. I'm just going to have a discussion about this most recent process.
Okay, okay. The bottom line is that you actually approved this process and that you were provided the proper documents to provide for.
Oh, no, that's not what I did. I did not approve this most
Okay. Okay, this is getting to be childish, and I do appreciate it.
Well, you have the gavel.
I do, and you keep interrupting. So anyway, the point that we have here is we have documents that have been provided and will be provided for public view. Mr. Sentance has been a part of this process, and with that, I'd like to turn it over. You can flip through so that the public will know, Charles, just sort of the areas that, and I won't go into great detail because I hadn't planned to. However, you are welcome to read them, but it's very specific. It was approved by the board. The process was approved by the board actually last year, and we are facing the anniversary of the hiring as well as on the job. And we are, based on our contract that we approved, we are actually challenged. We have to meet deadlines, and it was simple. Most of your evaluations are already expected anyway. But with that, I'd like to recognize Mr. Gillis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, and let me try to get some directions from the board. Do we want to go through the composite evaluation at this time, or would you prefer that we go into the executive session and then come out of that?
Mr. Gillis, what do you recommend that the board do? We certainly think it's important.
We've already established that a quorum is present, and at this time, we will of course need a motion to convene into an executive session pursuant to the Alabama Code section 3625A, 7A1, and 7A3, general reputation and character, and for the purpose of receiving legal advice on pending matters that may result in arbitration, litigation, or mediation. And for those reasons, we would say and recommend that we go into an executive session, assuming that there is a vote from a motion from the board to do such. Any vote, I would remind you, must be a recorded vote. Board members must have their vote recorded, much like we did to establish the quorum, and the vote has to be part of the minutes of this particular meeting. In addition to the motion and the carrying of the motion, we'll also need a statement from you, Madam Chair, with regard to whether or not the board will reconvene after the executive session, and if so, the approximate time that we expect to come back for that purpose.
If the board convenes an executive session, do you have an estimate in terms of the amount of time that would be required?
My best judgment, Madam Chair, would probably be 15, 20 minutes. I think there will be sufficient time to cover the matters that are addressed that permits this executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Gillis. Do we have a motion from the board to convene? And do we have
I
a second?
recommend that we go into executive
Point
session
of
for
order.
good name and character and for legal advice, perhaps regarding arbitration, litigation, and what was the last word you said?
I said arbitration, mediation, litigation matters
Mediation.
that may likely lead to.
Point of order.
Yes, I recognize
Point
your
of
order.
Okay. I voted on, I did my evaluation under protest. We did not get to vote on on having to turn in the evaluations last Friday. That was done unilaterally. We did not vote to have a penalty of awarding us a 0 on behalf of Mr. Sentance if we didn't get our evaluation in by 5 o'clock. And I don't think any of this was fair. We should have had a vote before we got this far.
Well, in response to your point of order, and it's well taken, actually, there is no vote required for doing an evaluation. It is not a part of the contract itself. If it had been a part of the contract, we certainly would have followed that procedurally.
But you changed it by making
I didn't
zeros.
change it. No, I didn't change the contract. I cannot.
Well,
and I do
maybe
not,
you didn't change it. It was unfair.
Well, I duly noted. Your opinion will be made a part of the record, and as well as your question, every day. I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's important to note for the public to know that when the evaluation forms were sent out after the board was asked to provide the dates that would be best for them for the meeting. I did send it out following our last meeting in July, and each day thereafter there was discussion, and it was noted, and a reminder was presented, I think every day except for one, and that was, I think it was Tuesday of the week preceding today. And also a reminder that was made again the morning.
Point of order, why
let
did
me
you...
answer your question.
But there's a
interrupt.
motion on the floor. We
There-
really should have did the
I
motion
know,
and
I
second
know.
and then discussion.
Well, because it's a point of order which supersedes, and it provides for that, but I do think it warrants a response, and if you let me respond, then we will do what is proper and we will go into a vote. The response is that every board member was reminded. The attorney's office called as a reminder at noon, and the reason for informing everyone, having had more than a week to respond and fill out your form, which is 5 pages, it was because we had to have enough time at the meeting on Tuesday for the attorney's office to provide the composite, which we will discuss, and at this point I'd like to take a vote on the motion, as Dr. Richardson has pointed out, that is on the table. And with that, we will have, again, a vote.
Are you taking
We need a
discussion?
second. We didn't
No,
get a
we have a second?
We need-
You had made
I made the motion.
yeah.
Okay, second. Okay.
So with that, we will take a vote on
Could we take-
going into executive
Normally, under the
session.
rules, we also take discussion at this point. The rules require that you accept discussion at this point.
I understand the rules. Mr. Gillis, would you like to address the focus of the discussion? And you will be called out of order for the discussion should be focused on your feelings regarding an executive session.
Well, I won't
So-
be discussing my feelings, but I will be discussing my thoughts.
Well,
Alabama
wait, no,
law-
not yet. I've requested a comment from our attorney.
Motion second.
It's been motion and second, and then,
Discussion relative to the executive session.
If the question is whether or not we're going to do the evaluation in an executive session, we're not going to do that. But, and I don't know if that's.
So, yeah, my question is that, because the Alabama law does not allow for executive sessions to discuss job performance.
And we're not going to do that.
Okay?
No.
You also, well, I will not be attending an executive session. We need to do the people's business in front of the people, and I'm not going to attend an executive session, and I'm not going to vote for an executive session.
and we will do.
And Madam Chair, may I just simply remind the board member, executive sessions are not for deliberation, and we do not intend to deliberate, and we do not intend to, at least we're going to express our opinion to you as to whether or not you are deliberating. We do intend to engage in discussion and provide information, and beyond that, we do not intend to delve into.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Gillis. I'm not aware of any good name and character items that we need to take up, and so with that in mind, I'm just unwilling to subject myself to an executive session. The people's business need to be done in front of the people, and I strenuously object to an executive session for that reason. We are a transparent board. We should remain transparent. This hasn't been a transparent process, and for that reason, I'll not be voting for it.
Okay. With that, and I can assure you that the people's business will be done in public, and we will return, as stated, 15 to 20 minutes from the point that we convene into executive session, if that is the board's will. At this point, I'd like to have a vote. All those in favor of convening an executive session, please raise your hands. All those opposed? 2 in opposition, and please make it. With that, we have a room that has been made available, and we will proceed to that room with attorneys, and at this point I'm turning over our discussion to Mr. Gillis and Mr. Haynes. So thank you very much. And we will return again in 15 to 20 minutes, which would be approximately 12:45 to 12:50, but before 1.
Take this before I do
Oh,
something.
take it, Tim, give it to me.
Before I do something horrible. I'm about to drive daddy behind, you know what I'm saying?
Is it candy?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll bring it.
All right, darling.
Can I take my purse?
Okay. I'm just going to put it in my purse.
Oh, you think
Second.
session.
And all those in favor, board, please raise your hand
Reconvene from executive session.
for public meeting. So it appears to be.
Those opposed?
Okay, and one opposition, which will be duly recorded. And at this point in time, I'd like to turn it over once again to Mr. Gillis to make a presentation, and he will share what we did not discuss and what is appropriate to share. And thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for one correction, so that we do have it properly documented in the minutes and so that it is a part of the record, I want to turn over the written opinion that I have that allowed us to go into the executive session. We need to make that a part of the record. And through you, I'd like to give it to the Secretary.
Please do. Thank you.
Before we get to the evaluation and the process that was utilized, I'd simply say we're dealing with composite numbers, and then we're taking the average of those numbers. The form, the evaluation form, is a form that the chair has addressed, and the number of categories that the evaluation against which it was made.
Would you make it clear to those in attendance that the board actually has not seen the evaluation form, and also it was not discussed in anything else that you think is appropriate for them to
And I appreciate
understand?
that. The chair is absolutely correct. They have not seen the composite scores. They sent their evaluations into my office, and my office is the one who compiled these numbers and then came up with the instrument that you will see shortly and the numbers that are reflected on the document. While in the executive session, we did not get into any area outside of the legal advice that we gave with regard to some questions that had been raised that we thought needed to be addressed in giving legal advice to the board, specifically staying away from those areas that we know and by statute we cannot discuss and we did not discuss. And with that being said, we'll look at the instrument. Again, and my technical assistant may have to help us if we want to enlarge this in any manner.
And do we have copies for board members? I have not seen a copy either.
Yeah. There's no point looking at it. I can't see it.
Well, and this is really more for the public consumption as much as anything, so that they'll understand what we have. But we have not seen this, so this is the first time for all of us to have the opportunity. And certainly Mr. Sentance will receive a copy as well.
But while those copies are being passed out, at the top of the evaluation form, of course, it lists the scores and what the particular numbers represent. One, meaning that need improvement, two, proficient, and three, exceptional. And again, what we simply did was to take each of the evaluations that we received and compile those numbers in the various categories that go down the left side of the page. State Superintendent of Education implements policies of the Board of subparagraphs that are listed on the Roman numeral 1. And again, we looked at each of the scores that are listed there in Roman numeral 1A, and we see that there's a total composite score of 10.5, and we simply divided that to get the 1.31, which is the average score. And we did that for the different categories that we have listed. Item 2, Roman numeral 2, has to do with educational leadership of schools, and the 4 sub-paragraph or sub-items that are under that particular category. You may do a better job of
Mr. Gillis, what was the divisor?
Big pardon?
What was the divisor?
8 board members, and
is that appropriate since I did not answer?
Now, again, you'll have to take that with the chair, but it was my understanding that you were advised, as well as the other members were advised, that you could elect to participate, and if you chose not to participate, I believe there were emails that were sent around that said that that would be the equivalent of 0.
There were a number of emails that were sent around. That's accurate. So I would say here that I did not give Mr. Sentance any zeros. I chose not to participate in this, but evidently the divisor was 8. I don't know what to say about that. That was not a decision of the board. That was the decision of the chair.
Yes.
Well, that's fine. I don't think it'll change the divisor that much, but we can certainly have 2 divisors. It's not Mr. Gillis, but he has a copy of every email that was sent with the reminders. The reason for that is to ensure that your constituency has representation as a part of the evaluation process, and I think that's crucial. You can still register a protest, it's appropriate, but you have to be included, and you were included in everything that was sent out. But that, again, that needs to be noted in part of the record, so I'll return it back to you, Mr. Gillis. Thank you.
And we followed the process as we understood it that had gone out through the emails.
That was never voted on.
Yeah, I understand that was never voted on, but and there was no process that was ever decided upon, but that's fine. We'll move on.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Again, as I indicated to you, educational leadership of schools is the second category of this evaluation process. And you'll see the numbers that are reflected in terms of the total score and then the average scores that are shown on the projector screen.
Was there, so the average score on some of these is close to 1. That means every single person gave zeros?
Now, in some instances, board members chose not to address that particular area, and so there was not.
So it was a 0 because they chose not to address it, or it was a 0 because they gave a 0?
No, we took the total number that was shown, and if that particular member did not assign a score to that number, they still were counted in the process, again, because we're using 8 as the divisor.
Okay, but you can see my confusion. I mean, it's, well, so are we, should the divisor be, it doesn't matter.
In each category, we're trying to be consistent with what we understood the instructions that had been sent out by.
And let's
I can understand it's hard to be consistent when there's no plan to be consistent with.
Ms. Hunter, thank you for your input, but we will proceed with the presentation.
I haven't had any input, so.
We will proceed with the presentation without interruption, no other board members interrupting, and then we will have the appropriate discussion. But thank you, Mr. Gillis, for being patient.
The next category has to do with financial management. And again, the same process that we followed. On the left-hand side of the form, you'll see the various measures regarding financial management. And then on the right side of the page, you'll see the total scores, and you'll see the average score. And again, it bears repeating. We simply followed added and division is what we engaged in. The fourth category has to do with community relations. And again, the 4 subparagraphs under that section, the corresponding total score and average score. The fifth category having to do with communication and interpersonal relations. The subparagraphs A through G that are listed there, the total score and the average scores. And then the sixth category, professional development, leadership, and responsibilities, subparagraphs A through F on the right-hand side, and then the total scores on the left-hand side, total score and the average score. And so once we did this compilation, I'm presenting it to the board.
I don't. Wait. Okay, thank you. As we go into the discussion, let's respect the opportunity for every board member without interruption. And please recognize the fact that as we discuss something that deals with personnel in particular, that it is important for us to be very careful and respectful and ensure that we're called upon, each one of us, and that's what we need to do. So with that, Ms. Hunter, if you have a question or two or three, then you're welcome to ask those questions as we move into discussion, and certainly Mr. Gillis is here to provide those answers.
Well, Mr. Gillis, thank you. You have the individual documents from the board members that turned their individual evaluations in.
I do.
Which board members submitted it? Did all the board members except me turn in evaluations?
That's correct.
Okay, so the average score was an average of 1, 2, or 3. What does the total score mean?
Well,
that means the total number of points given among all the board members?
Let's go back to the first page.
Okay.
Implements policies of the Board of Education. We took 8 numbers, or 8 ratings, a composite score, that composite score being 10.5, and divided it by 8, an average of 1.31.
Okay.
And we did that for each of the categories as we went up and down the pages.
And
added all the scores of the board members.
And but your denominator was 8 instead of 7.
8 board members.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to let the record reflect that I did not complete this. I did not assign zeros. I am not submitting because I think this was an illegitimate process, and I don't accept that this is the proper score because I did not submit and I did not assign zeros. So I don't think these averages are, not that I think the math is wrong, but I don't think these averages are correct because I didn't assign zeros.
Mr. Gillis, would you respond to, and as appropriate, share some of the things that you shared with us in terms of the process and whether using the evaluation and doing the evaluation at this point is appropriate I think that that would actually be beneficial not only for the board members and perhaps Mary Scott, who chose not to attend, but the public in general as appropriate, because I think that what we discussed was certainly would help her understand.
And if I understand your directions correctly, again, there were a series of emails that went out.
The contract and when we approved the evaluation. What was, I think, Mr. Means. Sorry, my voice is impacted by this, whatever's going around that I've been trying to shake a couple of, so Mr. Means knows, and if you'd like to help, since he did a lot of the background apparently.
We reviewed the contract document, the employment contract, and the employment contract was signed on September 8th. As we understand, Mr. Sentance began his employment around August 11 of 2016, but nevertheless, the contract calls for him to start on September.
Point of information, that's incorrect. I didn't start until September 13th.
Okay, well, I can be corrected on that as far as that's concerned, but nevertheless, the start date was September 12th as per contract. The contract provides that evaluation should be done and completed before December 31 of 2017. Evaluations are appropriate at any time by any employer, should they so desire. But in this case, in terms of the timeline, as of September, Mr. Sentence would be employed by 1 year.
Did you do the composite, sir? Did you complete, you did the composite score? Yeah, you did. So Governor Ivey also did not submit an evaluation, is that correct?
Yeah.
But you used the denominator of 8 instead of 9.
That's correct.
So the same logic for me did not apply to her.
Well, no, we didn't use that.
Okay, you did, okay. So the governor got special treatment in this matter.
If that's what you want to call special treatment.
Well, the governor decided, and it's on record, that she would not participate in the entire process in terms of, and partly because she has not been here long enough, or in the position as an ex officio member, and I certainly think that's pretty much on record.
Yeah, I think it's also on record that she's the standing president of the board,
and I
believe that
she's but we will have.
Was she part of the divisor?
No, because she told us ahead of time that she would not participate because she has not been here long enough. Ms. Hunter has been, and if you would like, we can have it figured in with 7 just to show you, but it is appropriate in that all board members were asked to participate. It was based on a previous vote on the contract as well as the vote on the evaluation tool. Normally, in an evaluation process, in terms of how it has been in the past, and if you're welcome to look at the local level, you don't necessarily vote to go through an evaluation process because it's predetermined in your contract. And every case will be different. In this case, it's pretty explicit in terms of the options that the board has, and you were part of that process and voted on that process. But we do have a question to follow up.
I do. I have a question. In an instance where you might have 1.5, does the 5 round the 1 up to 2, or do you just look at the 1 on the left-hand side? How is that done? Or has it been determined?
I understand what you're saying. If it's 2 places past the decimal point,
yes.
If it's 5
or above,
then you hike.
It goes up.
The 10th decimal point, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I do. I had a question about the agenda today. I'm troubled by the lack of input. I'm troubled that we didn't have a discussion about this.
Well, let me just say the discussion right now.
And I'm troubled that on our roll today, we didn't include comments from the public. I'm troubled by that.
Well, let me clarify, because the discussion is on the evaluation tool as a follow-up to our discussion, and you were certainly given the opportunity to participate. The discussion is not on any particular action, So you cannot have other than the evaluation. And without knowing what you would discuss, it would be inappropriate to post something with an assumption. And certainly we've seen a lot of assumptions being made most recently. The board at this point has seen the evaluation tool. We have seen the results from board members, and our duty at this point is to vote to accept the tool. And there is, as you know, on the last page, a line on the original version that you received, and on that line, we have, and Mr. Gillis, do you have, okay, he's just looking, checking, make sure he didn't leave anything. But the other is that we have a line, when we approved the evaluation tool, we provided a way for Mr. Sentence to acknowledge that he has received the results of the board's evaluation, and he will have an opportunity to appropriately respond. And at this point, I would call for a recommendation or a motion from the board to accept the document, and certainly any options are available, but this is the board's prerogative as far as accepting it. Again, it's not agreeing with it, but it's providing the next step according to the contract, and giving Mr. Sentence an opportunity, again, to sign the document, acknowledge receipt, not acceptance, except then he will have the opportunity certainly to respond to what has been presented today. Do I have a motion from any board member?
I make a motion, we accept it.
Second.
And
time for discussion.
Any time for discussion? Certainly, are you asking for recognition, Ms. Hunter?
So, Ms. Starks on July the 12th sent us this email. Please complete the attached forms, Stephanie Bell. When you click on the form, it says working draft. Mm-hmm. And so there was some confusion there. I sent emails back questioning why the word draft was included. I asked why the early evaluation. I asked if Mr. Sentence had a chance to respond. I still don't have answers to those questions. Anytime I've ever been evaluated or given an evaluation, the circumstances of those evaluations were clear. And in this case, I chose not to respond because I did not want to confer legitimacy on what I saw was an unfair and illegitimate process. I am not opposed to an early evaluation, but we've never had any discussion, nor have we ever had a vote. So in light of that, I will not accept this, Mr. Sentence. I'd like to know the answer. You can volunteer it or not, but I'd like to know the answer of whether or not you had time, given the amount of work that you were doing on ESSA and given the timing of your knowledge of this, whether you had an opportunity to respond when Dr. Weiss was evaluated and when Dr. Hill was evaluated. They sent pieces of correspondence to the board explaining how they had met the requirements that were laid out 1 year in advance. And in this case, we didn't receive such a piece of correspondence, I presume because it was all dropped on us unexpectedly. So for that reason, I will not vote to accept. I do recommend that we deal with this. We don't accept this because these divisors are not correct. These scores are not correct. I think that this board has excluded the governor. I'm very troubled by that. I did not give him zeros, and yet my input is the divisor was included. That's a problem. And so these scores, while the math is correct, and I can appreciate that the math, to the extent that you all were given direction, you did it absolutely as directed, and I appreciate that. It's obvious that you've done work on that. But this is not the proper score. So for that reason, I would not accept it, and I won't accept it because it wasn't handled correctly, and we haven't handled this as a board.
We have, I'd like
to speak.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a point, and people realizing that is not my opinion you just heard. That's a fellow board members. I'm under the opinion that I agree with council. As an employer, I think we have the right to evaluate at any time. I think it's our duty to, if we feel we have a right, have a need to. And the communication was made over and over and over to every board member. You had the option of either filling out an evaluation or not. Any one of us could have not sent it in. All of us could have sent it in. But we each had the right to mark whatever score we wanted. And I feel it's my duty as a board member to do that. Now, and I'm, like I say, under the opinion of the council, I agree with what you said. As an employer, as a former employer of people, I've always felt that it was my duty and had the right to evaluate people. So that's where I'm at.
Madam Vice President.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with Mr. Newman. And in March, we did the evaluation process where we got input from all board members, those who had concerns. And at that time, Mr. Sentance was given an opportunity to give his opinion on the areas perhaps that some of us had concerns about. So today, upon also hearing the opinion of legal counsel, I was viewing today as a way to follow up from what we did in March, knowing that we can evaluate at any time.
Thank you. And thank you for initiating that discussion and giving every board member the same opportunity to express their concerns in a public arena as we are doing right now and have done through combined evaluation. Thank you. Ms. Peters?
I hate to repeat myself, but I'm afraid I'll have to. I do not go along with this. I don't like the way the composite score was done. I don't think it was fair to include a mandate about zeros. That was not voted on. That was done.
It's not a vote. Well,
It sure was.
The vote was actually last year.
The part about the zero mandate, we never voted on that. And
It's a contract.
I had no counsel. I tried to get you to postpone this until after we met today. And so we could have legal counsel. I called in, but I didn't get any answers. And the timing of the evaluation, I think it was premature because of the added responsibilities that came up later because of the mess we were left in that we didn't know about due to previous superintendent, maybe more than one. So I do not concur with this.
Duly recorded. Any other board member? Dr. McCarty?
Just one comment. We were also given an opportunity to write comments on here, and I don't know if you took those comments or not, or if this is just the numerical score. But on a few, I know as for me, I can't speak for anybody else. There were a few where I put had not enough information to do, and I think one example might be fixed assets. I wasn't sure about the fixed asset inventory, and I saw that score was really low, and I'm an assumption here, but it could be that several of us were not aware of that, and so we wrote a comment to say, this is why I'm not scoring this, and so that is I just wanted that clarified.
And anyone other board member?
What did you just say? I can't hear.
I have a question.
She said,
all right. Mr. Gillis, please help me understand how, because the individual evaluations are also public record. Please help the public understand how those can be requested.
How they can be requested?
Mm-hmm. How can the individual evaluations be requested? Should the public or members of the public send emails to your offices?
Well,
that's a public record, sir.
And I have no doubt about that public record,
but I have a question.
I think it would have to go through the board.
How can those, okay, if Ms. Dean, how can members of the public who would like to see the emails that were exchanged, as well as between the board members, all of them, and Mr. Gillis, as well as the individual evaluations, how would those be requested by members of the public for an open records request?
Well, the first question I would ask is who has possession and has custody of those documents?
Mr. Gillis does.
Because I would suggest they can forward those to Darnell, Ms. Foley.
Okay, so members of the public who have questions about the individual evaluations as as well as the email exchanges, if those are requested by members of the public, who should get the email request?
I don't mind having my emails made public. In fact, actually, it would support everything that I've already said. And frankly, they were done for that purpose, to provide for the documentation of the process. And that included the reminders. It included the fact that it was reinforced that the board has already voted for the contract, and the board's decision pretty much stands. And it was signed by Mr. Sentance. The other has to do with the evaluation tool, which was not only discussed on multiple occasions with the board, but also approved and included discussion from Mr. Sentence with the expectation. And I think Dr. Richardson has a point regarding our discussion in March.
I was just about to ask, from our discussion in March, and we went through the same process of assigning scores, we did not, those were not requested. What's the difference, Ms. Scott, in reference to this evaluation and what we did in March? No one requested. We had numbers just like this. Yes, I'm asking you, what's the difference? You're saying we need to make it available, but you didn't say that in March. Is there any difference in what we did in March and what we're doing now?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just asking for clarity so I will understand. You know, in March, we went through the process, and to make scores available, that didn't come up. So I'm saying, what was different from March up until now? Maybe I've forgotten something.
We didn't do an evaluation. We didn't do a written evaluation in March.
I don't remember.
We didn't do a written evaluation in March.
No. We made comments.
No, we didn't do a written evaluation.
No, I said we made comments, right? Oral. So it was obvious.
But they were oral.
The way.
There were oral comments. There's a video record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that
that's what
there's a pretty set process for ordering a video record. But since this was sent to you, my question remains, how do members of the public request the conversations that occurred between board members on email around this and the individual evaluations? How do members of the public request that if they want it?
I don't have any problem with any of the emails. I don't know of any that went beyond what you received, so you can release them if you want to.
Well,
but I just make sure you release all of them. It was very limited in any kind of discussion among board members, other than reminders and specifics that included documents that we've discussed today. It's been a very open in terms of you have been included in everything. I can't speak for any other board member, but from an official standpoint, you have been in these emails. Our attorneys have been copied in those emails. And so there is absolutely nothing that you have missed in this entire process except for the executive session that you decided you did not want to attend, and the participation in the evaluation process, which, again, the intent at this point is to present the results to Mr. Sentence. We can discuss at the next meeting, predetermined by the board. This is the appropriate time to address that with your vote. And the next step is simply to present this as appropriate for an annual evaluation, to give him enough time to present it, and the way it fits with the hiring August the 11th, and then the official date, September the 13th. It's not December the 31st, which you have mentioned. The requirement is and the word in our contract is annual. We're at that point, and it's appropriate for board participation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And so at this point in time, I'd like to call for...
Where should they request information? That's
a fair question. I guess you can discuss that with the attorney, but let's move forward. Do we have a motion on the table to discuss?
Motion to accept the...
Yes, so we have it on the table.
She had a question.
And at this point, Ms. Peters, do you have a...
I've just been wanting to say, I'm almost positive that it's not the same people here, but the board evaluations of Dr. Hill, which was in post-secondary, were available publicly. I mean, I saw them somewhere.
And that's according to the contract. I absolutely have no problem with my evaluation. I've always provided that.
If the other people were aware of that.
Yeah, and my recommendation, if you feel like you can provide it personally, I don't mind mine. And that's certainly what we have, we've discussed, but the board is the board, and the board takes action. We do not operate as a, and so in this at this point, the emphasis has to be on the tally. If you'd like to have it calculated differently, we can provide that so that you can take it to the public and discuss it at that point. But we function as a board. We are focused on this as a board. Individually, we don't have the same kind of impact, and it could be negative in terms of addressing something that is appropriate. And also, at this point, I'd like to call for a vote on the motion that has been duly seconded. And at this point, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor? Of accepting and presenting it to the employee. It's not, all it is an evaluation tool, absolutely. And then we are requesting a response from Mr. Sentance that will be presented to the board publicly. And at this point...
Do we get it to vote negatively?
You can do whatever you want to. But now, those in opposition?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And those abstaining? You want us to ask again? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. I don't think there's clarity.
All those in favor of the motion, yeah.
All right, clarity. And all those opposed? Thank you. With that, Mr. Sentance, the document is yours for your signature, and my preference, the board can express their personal preferences, but my recommendation would be that your response be presented at our next work session, and then we will have an opportunity to discuss it once again for those who may need.
Is this a regular meeting or?
This is a regular meeting.
You want him to present his thing at the what?
At the next work session, or if you'd like to make a presentation at a voting meeting. Again, that's the board's prerogative. It would provide for even more discussion.
I'd like to make a motion, please, ma'am.
Okay.
That Mr. Sentence offer his response to this at the next working meeting of this board, since it was presented to him.
In the official board meeting,
yes.
not a work session.
That's correct.
And that is appropriate. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion? And all those opposed?
Abstention.
And there's clarity. Okay. Thank you. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. And a vote. All those in favor? All those in favor? Do we have Thank you.
You don't have to go. Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Well, I just didn't
I know, you're right.
Yes, next meeting is I didn't want to waste any more time.
No, I'm not sorry. How do you But I could be wrong. Don't take my word for it. Ask Ella, but I know I wasn't here. I wasn't here. You were not here. Hey, look. You only have one chance. Like something else.